June 6, 1944. Western Europe hangs on a knife edge as the Allied invasion threatens to rupture the German Atlantic Wall and collapse the Reich's hold on the continent. German field commands are already under pressure, flooded with reports, sightings, and intercepted signals, yet one belief dominates their assessments. George S. Patton is not here. He cannot be. His army, they insist, must still be waiting to strike elsewhere. And if that judgment is wrong, Germany's last strategic reserve will be committed to the wrong battlefield with no path to recovery. In the midst of this intelligence crisis, Patton rejects the role assigned to him by enemy and ally alike, accepting a choice with only two costs: remain invisible and preserve the deception, or appear too soon and shatter Allied credibility. Inside German headquarters, a private dismissal, barely recorded, will determine command authority, operational legitimacy, and the discipline of belief itself. Historians later mark this moment because certainty, not firepower, failed first, and its failure redirected armies. This channel exists for serious, untold history. Subscribe now so you don't miss what followed. And before we continue, what city are you watching from? By 1943, German intelligence believed it had achieved clarity. Wherever Allied armies struck in Western Europe, one figure would define the decisive blow. Reports from embassies, prisoner interrogations, and intercepted broadcasts converged on a single assumption. George Patton embodied American offensive doctrine and would command the main landing force when it came. This belief hardened into doctrine inside German headquarters. Patton's record in North Africa and Sicily was dissected less as history than as pattern. He advanced fast, accepted losses, and pressed until resistance broke. To German planners, such a commander was not optional, he was inevitable. Any Allied invasion without Patton at its head appeared strategically irrational. Allied command understood this perception and did little to contradict it. Public statements, press photographs, and controlled leaks reinforced Patton's visibility. Even his disciplinary scandals, rather than diminishing him, seemed to confirm German expectations. Only a commander with unrestrained authority, they reasoned, would be tolerated despite controversy. Within German operational planning, this consensus narrowed attention. Divisions, armor reserves, and reaction timetables were aligned against where Patton was expected to appear, not where evidence suggested landings might occur. The assumption simplified complexity and imposed order on uncertainty. By early 1944, this belief was no longer debated, it was embedded. Patton's presence had become synonymous with the Allied main effort, and German officers planned accordingly, convinced that recognizing him would be the key to surviving the invasion. Patton understood the reputation that followed him and the danger it created. He had cultivated speed, aggression, and visibility deliberately, knowing that enemies planned against personalities as much as formations. Yet in 1944, he faced an unfamiliar demand: to remain present without acting, visible without advancing. Allied leadership assigned him a role that contradicted instinct. He was to command an army that would not move, lead troops that would not fight, and project authority without execution. For a commander whose identity was inseparable from motion, the assignment bordered on erasure. Acceptance carried a cost to pride and credibility. Rejection threatened unity and discipline. Patton did not protest publicly. Instead, he complied with precision. He appeared at inspections, delivered speeches, and allowed himself to be seen. Each gesture reinforced German assumptions while denying him action. His willingness to be sidelined was not passive obedience, but strategic submission. Privately, Patton expressed awareness of the stakes. If the deception failed, blame would concentrate on him. His reputation, built over years, would collapse into liability, yet he accepted that outcome as preferable to operational failure elsewhere. Patton's dissent lay not in argument but in endurance. He rejected the belief that commanders must always command visibly to matter. In allowing his image to be weaponized against the enemy, he accepted a role where influence replaced movement and restraint replaced attack. German confidence rested on more than reputation. It was reinforced by structure. Their intelligence doctrine assumed that large-scale deception required coordination beyond Allied capacity. Fake armies, false signals, and sustained misdirection, they believed, could not be maintained under invasion pressure. Errors would surface, contradictions would appear, reality would assert itself. Moreover, Patton himself seemed an immovable variable. His temperament, well documented, appeared incompatible with prolonged inactivity. German analysts concluded that any attempt to hide him from the battlefield would fail because he would expose himself through action. His personality was treated as a constant in operational equations. The consequences of misjudgment were understood yet dismissed. If German reserves moved toward the wrong sector, recovery would be impossible. Fuel shortages, Allied air supremacy, and fragile rail networks meant that, once committed, armored divisions could not redeploy in time. A single false assumption could determine the campaign's outcome. Still, German command preferred certainty over ambiguity. Betting against Patton's absence felt riskier than betting on his arrival. Deception on this scale required humility, the admission that one's own assumptions might be manipulated. That admission never occurred. Thus, deception was labeled impossible, not because it lacked evidence, but because accepting its possibility threatened the intellectual authority of those responsible for defense. The deception succeeded through accumulation, not spectacle. Radio traffic mimicked the rhythms of an active army. Dummy equipment filled fields visible to reconnaissance aircraft. Controlled leaks reached neutral diplomats. Each signal alone was inconclusive. Together they formed a narrative German intelligence already believed. Patton's movements were deliberately observable. He traveled openly, inspected units, and appeared where German agents expected him. These actions required no fabrication. They merely exploited expectation. German observers reported faithfully, reinforcing the assumption they were trained to confirm. Within German headquarters, dissenting reports surfaced. Some officers questioned inconsistencies in landing patterns and logistics flows. These concerns were noted, then overridden by senior judgment. Patton's continued visibility outweighed conflicting data. Assumption carried more authority than observation. As the invasion approached, German confidence hardened. Orders were drafted, reserves held, and contingency plans aligned with Patton's anticipated appearance. The absence of his attack was interpreted not as contradiction, but as delay. When reality finally intruded, it did so violently. By the time German command acknowledged that Patton was not where certainty placed him, the window for correction had closed. The assumptions meant to bring clarity had instead imposed paralysis, proving that reputation, once trusted absolutely, could become a weapon turned inward. The first contradictions arrived quietly. In mid-June 1944, German frontline reports from Normandy described American units advancing without the familiar tempo associated with Patton. Movements were deliberate, methodical, and cautious under artillery cover. Intelligence officers flagged the anomaly but hesitated to elevate it. The landings themselves were not in question. The identity of the decisive commander was. Aerial reconnaissance added tension. Armored concentrations expected near the Pas-de-Calais showed no signs of movement, while Normandy forces expanded their lodgment beyond what diversionary doctrine predicted. Signals intelligence intercepted messages suggesting logistical prioritization inconsistent with a feint. These fragments converged at a single operational crossroads. Either the Allies were violating their own logic or German assumptions were wrong. One field report was explicit. A captured American officer, questioned under pressure, dismissed Patton's involvement entirely. His answer conflicted with months of preparatory intelligence. The report circulated briefly, then stalled. Confirmation bias intervened. German analysts reasoned that prisoners rarely knew high command intentions. The testimony was categorized as noise. At the tactical level, officers sensed imbalance. Requests for armored reinforcement grew urgent, yet approval stalled pending confirmation of Patton's arrival elsewhere. Time became the variable under dispute. Each hour without decisive clarity tightened the operational dilemma. This moment did not erupt as revelation. It accumulated as discomfort. Evidence challenged belief, but belief still governed response. The crossroads was reached not with certainty, but with hesitation. And hesitation under invasion conditions carried its own consequences. German command hierarchy responded to contradiction with reinforcement of doctrine. Senior officers interpreted uncertainty as evidence of Allied deception, not error. To them, inconsistency confirmed manipulation. If Patton had not yet appeared, it meant his strike was still pending. Orders from higher headquarters emphasized restraint. Armored divisions were instructed to hold position until confirmation of the main effort. This guidance was framed as discipline, not delay. Junior officers questioning the assumption were reminded that premature commitment would hand victory to the enemy. Authority substituted conviction for proof. Within staff meetings, dissent narrowed. Officers who raised alternative interpretations were countered with accumulated intelligence files detailing Patton's previous campaigns. History was invoked as validation. The argument was not whether evidence had changed, but whether it outweighed established patterns. It was decided that it did not. Command legitimacy was at stake. Admitting misjudgment would undermine months of preparation and expose systemic failure. Maintaining the consensus preserved authority, even as the battlefield evolved beyond it. Decisions were thus insulated from reality by hierarchy. This pushback was not irrational. German command operated under pressure, limited mobility, and overwhelming Allied air power. They sought stability where none existed. Yet by treating uncertainty as threat rather than signal, they dismissed the very information meant to guide adaptation. The refusal to reconsider Patton's position hardened into policy. Authority held, but flexibility vanished. The chain of command remained intact, even as its relevance eroded with each passing engagement. Execution followed belief. Armored reserves remained fixed near the Pas-de-Calais, awaiting an attack that never materialized. In Normandy, frontline units fought with diminishing support, improvising defenses against expanding Allied pressure. Requests for reinforcement were deferred repeatedly, justified by the expectation of a greater threat elsewhere. German operational orders reflected confidence rather than contingency. Counterattacks were planned locally, without massed armor, preserving strength for Patton's anticipated blow. This fragmentation weakened impact and surrendered initiative. Allied forces exploited the hesitation, advancing incrementally but relentlessly. Air superiority compounded the error. When German armor finally attempted movement, Allied aircraft inflicted heavy losses. The delay transformed maneuver into exposure. Decisions made under false certainty became irreversible under fire. Command communications revealed a shift. Language changed from anticipation to concern, then to justification. Reports emphasized endurance rather than maneuver. The window for decisive action closed not with a single order, but with cumulative inaction. At the front, officers recognized the pattern too late. The enemy was consolidating, not diverting. Yet by the time this realization gained traction, resources were depleted and options constrained. Execution under false certainty did not collapse immediately. It unraveled progressively as each decision reinforced the last. The structure of belief ensured consistency, but consistency under wrong assumptions proved fatal. German forces fought with discipline, but without the strategic freedom needed to alter outcomes already set in motion. The consequences became undeniable by July 1944. Allied forces broke out of Normandy, rendering the held reserves operationally irrelevant. When Patton finally entered the campaign, it was not as the anticipated main effort, but as an exploitation force accelerating a collapse already underway. German command recognized the inversion too late. Post-war analysis reframed the episode. Historians noted that German intelligence did not fail from lack of information, but from overconfidence in interpretation. The refusal to believe contradictory evidence stemmed from institutional certainty, not ignorance. Patton's absence had been visible, but disbelief obscured it. German officers later acknowledged the rigidity. Memoirs described the paralysis imposed by expectation. Authority preserved order but suppressed adaptation. The Crossroads moment, once minimized, emerged as decisive. not because of a single error, but because of sustained refusal to adjust. For Allied planners, the episode confirmed the power of perception. Deception succeeded not by fabricating reality, but by reinforcing enemy belief. Patton's reputation, carefully maintained, functioned as operational gravity, pulling decisions toward it even when evidence resisted. This chapter of the war mattered because it demonstrated how certainty can outpace truth. The battlefield rewarded flexibility, not confidence. In the end, German command lost not because they lacked courage or competence, but because they trusted what they thought they knew more than what was unfolding before them.